Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover, and we're back with the fifth installment in my series where we break down every team's offseason. And this episode is going to be about the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Taking a look at the season that the Cavs just had, I landed on a grade of a D minus. They finished the year with a record of 22-50, which was good for 13th in the Eastern Conference. And pretty much nothing went right for Cleveland this year. I mean, we could start off with the Andre Drummond debacle. He was awful on both sides of the floor for Cleveland this year. On defense, he was horrible at pick and rolls. He wasn't much of a post defender despite his size and strength. Well, not really strength anymore. You could tell he's out of shape at this point in his career. All he really seemed to do was care about defensive rebounds. Offensively, he thought he was, Karl Anthony Towns or Nikola Jokic or prime DeMarcus Cousins, operating out both the high post and the low post, even taking threes, hooks, floaters, fadeaways. He thought it was just awful. It was completely awful for Cleveland. It was so bad that they had to release him and eat $28 million worth of dead cap. We can move on to Kevin Love, where Kevin Love at this point in his career is basically a spot-up shooter. He's always been awful defensively, but on offense, he's lost his speed that he used to have. He's lost his weight, which was really helpful for him in terms of pushing around players in the post back in his Minnesota days and the early days in Cleveland. But now he really lost all that weight, so now all he is really a spot-up shooter, and even that has been declining at the contract that he's on for the next 3 years, which we will get into the specifics later on that contract, but still not good for Cleveland. We can move on to a player like Taurean Prince, who I thought was a pretty solid acquisition for them. I thought he would be much more than he was. Really, all he was a spot-up shooter. He shot 41% on 4 attempts from behind the arc for Cleveland this year, which is pretty good. But he was god-awful shooting from everywhere else on the field, not named the three-point line. And he was pretty inconsistent defensively, and he's getting paid a decent amount of money, which is pretty disappointing. So you'd hope that he could come back better next year, but given how he performed this year, most likely not. We could even move on to a player like Cedi Osman, who, everybody, especially, Cleveland fans anointed, Cedi Osman, hyping him up as the next coming of LeBron, like the next star in Cleveland. And he was god-awful this year, both on offense and defense, just completely inefficient from everywhere, not a good defender, just a complete waste of a contract, really, getting paid also a decent amount of money. We can move on to even a player like Damian Dotson, who, as a Knicks fan, I was pretty sad that he left. He was a pretty valuable 3-and-D player, shot awful from the three-point line this year for Cleveland. We can move on to Isaac Okoro, their 5th pick in the draft this year, who, is a solid defender. He's really about 6'5", 6'6", hustles, good IQ, good hands. I'm not sure how quite versatile he is just because of his size. And, I don't know how efficient he's going to be at truly guarding like those big forwards, like those Kevin Durant types, or, like those Chris Middletons, just because of how much shorter he is than them. So, for me personally, that degrades his defensive value a little bit. But his versatility on the wing and, guarding 2s and some 1s is there. I thought he was a pretty solid rebounder for his size, only grabbing about 3 rebounds per game, considering the fact that he had players like Andre Drummond and Jared Allen, Kevin Love on his team. I thought he showed playmaking flashes, but really on offense, he was god-awful. He really offers you nothing. Just a complete awful shooter, catch and shoot off the dribble. His mechanics are horrible. He needs to break them down, work them back up. Not much of a handle. He's really nothing on offense. Some Cavs will tell you that he has some playmaking value, but again, how valuable, as I've stated before in previous videos, how valuable is playmaking in the NBA if you can't create your own shot? Unless Isaac Okoro is going to be surrounded by 4 of the shooters on the court, which is not the case, then we might have a different conversation. But he's really a negative on off, a complete negative. I'm not sure. I don't see him being much more than a solid role player in the NBA, which is disappointing because this is a theme with Cleveland. The NBA gives them chance and chance and chance and chance again, with these high picks, and they continue to waste them. Isaac Okoro was nothing more than a role player coming into the draft. I think a lot of people saw that. People thought that he has Kawhi Leonard potential, and he doesn't have the measurements or the flashes of Kawhi Leonard. So he's really a role player for Cleveland. And Collin Sexton even. I think Collin Sexton. I think the hate for Collin Sexton is a bit too much. I think the good player on a bad team putting up like great stats. I think that argument. How many times does that argument need to be proven wrong? With guys like Devin Booker, Trae Young, Karl Anthony Towns, even like a Zach LaVine. Collin Sexton is that level of player. I think he's gotten much better as a shooter from behind the arc, on and off the ball. I think he's a great slasher, pretty solid free throw shooter. But the problem with Collin Sexton is that he's really an undersized two guard at that six foot frame. Not much. I think Cavs fans will tell you that he's a better passer than he is, which I think there is some validity in that argument that he is a better passer than he's shown just because of the team surrounding him. But still, you'd like to see, like those truly great playmakers, if he was that level of a playmaker, he would make his teammates better, which Collin Sexton just simply doesn't. And again, you can make the argument that he hasn't had the teammates around him, to succeed, to show the playmaking potential that Cavs fans will tell you that he has. But again, if he had that potential, he would make the teammates around him better, which obviously he does not. But he's still a valuable scorer. I think he hustles on defense, but just because of how small he is, there's not a lot he can do. So, the market for Cleveland is the market for Collin Sexton is pretty inconsistent. I'm not sure what a trade for Collin Sexton would look like. But my Knicks are interested in him and look to be the front runners, as seems like Sexton and Cleveland are pretty much done. It's the end of the Sexland era. So I'm going to make a video on Collin Sexton pretty soon. So I'll continue to give my analysis and my opinion on him further in that video. And then moving on to like Darius Garland, who I thought was really the only reason why I didn't give the Cavs an F, just because of how big of a step he took in this season. He got much better as a shooter from the 3-point line, much better shooter from 2-point range, from mid range, from inside. He's always been inconsistent inside, the paint. I think he got a little bit better, but not much better. I think he got better facilitating for his teammates. He's not much of a defender, but overall he just looked more comfortable in the NBA, right? He only played, under 10 games in college, and he went straight to the NBA playing for Cleveland. So you had to cut him some slack last year, and he was great this year despite some knick-knack injury concerns. And another big reason why I didn't give them an F is really Jarrett Allen. I think that acquisition at the trade deadline was awesome, getting him for practically nothing. And he's great for them. He's their starting center moving forward, an awesome defensive presence, great rim roller, and I expect him to continue to grow along Darius Garland. But I mean, everybody, those are the only two bright spots on this team, really. I mean, Kobe Altman is a sus GM. I don't think he's really all that great as a GM. Even JB Bickerstaff, I would expect him, even though these are not good veterans, you expect him to maybe get a little bit more out of them, maybe be a little bit more creative, which he isn't. And even if you make the argument again, like you did for Collin Sexton, where he doesn't have the players around him to succeed as a coach, well, there's other coaches out there that can work with, like, is this roster really all that much more talented than the Knicks roster? Maybe the Knicks roster is more talented, but I don't think it's that much more talented. So, not all that great of a coach, not a good front office, maybe two bright spots, if that, on the roster currently. And not even to mention that they traded away Kevin Porter Jr., who was their best prospect. So Cleveland is not in a good spot moving forward. And really the only reason why I didn't give them an F is because of the Darius Garland's growth as a player and the Jarrett Allen acquisition at the trade deadline. Moving on to the offseason goals for the Cavs. First off, I have them finding a deal for Collin Sexton. Again, as I previously stated, I'm going to make a video explaining different Collin Sexton trade scenarios and where he's most likely to end up. But the rumors are that he's going to be a Knick. So I'll give my further analysis on what that deal would look like and my opinions on it, as a lifelong Knicks fan. But again, if that doesn't happen, then, continue to explore the market for Collin Sexton trades, as it seems like both sides are ready to leave each other. And number two, I have them exploring the market for other veterans on the team. So that entails, Kevin Love, Torian Prince, Shetty Osman, and potentially Larry Nance, who I think is the most likely to get traded, as I think he's the best player at the best contract and has the most to offer to a contending team. Again, Torian Prince, I'm not sure how many teams are going to be trading for him, making that much money, which we will get into the specifics of his contract later on. But Shetty Osman was, again, horrible this year. Kevin Love, disappointing at that massive contract. So I'm not sure what exactly they can get for those guys outside of Larry Nance, which I will get to different Larry Nance trade scenarios later on. But, Kevin Love, Chetty Osman, Torian Prince, I'm not sure what the Cavs can get for them, but definitely explore the market as to see what other teams think about them and what other teams would be willing to give up for them. And then really the only thing left is to re-sign Jarrett Allen. He's your starting center. He's arguably the best prospect on the team outside of Darius Garland, so I think re-signing him is a must. I don't think he's going to cost that much money, maybe like $14-15 million max, for a rim-rolling, solid defensive big. And then really outside of signing Jarrett Allen, there's not much. We'll get to their salary cap in a few. They have a mid-level exception worth about $10 million and maybe $5 million worth of salary if everything goes well for them, if they just want to really clear all their non-guaranteed contracts. So maybe they could go after, maybe a solid free agent. Maybe we'll get to specific names again with the free agents later. But then outside of that, really, it's just, the draft. And again, we'll get to the draft in a few. Moving on to the salary cap for the Cavs, we see Kevin Love is going to be making $31 million this year to be a average spot-up shooter, and that's literally it. Nobody's going to trade for Kevin Love at that contract. I highly doubt. I would be extremely surprised to see anybody trade for him, making that much money. Moving on to a player like Torian Prince, who again was a great spot-up shooter for Cleveland this year. Outside of that, was a very inefficient scorer, inconsistent defender. So, his value on the market, especially making a hefty price at $13 million, considering the fact that a player like Darius Garland is only making $7 million. That's not positive value for Cleveland. Larry Nance at $10 million. I highly value Larry Nance's defensive versatility, his switchability, his rim protection ability. He's shown flashes of being able to switch onto the perimeter at times. And, offensively, he's not really all that much of a shooter, but, he's shown obviously as a great role man. He's a good passer, smart player, a great veteran, only making $10 million per year. I think he's a very valuable contract. And I don't think he's going to net Cleveland anything crazy in a trade, but I think Cleveland should definitely trade him, as he would bring in at least assets. However minuscule those assets may be, they're still assets. Moving on to Chetty Osman, you can make an argument. In my opinion, he was the worst player out of all the players listed here at $8 million. That's extremely negative value, and it's sad looking at his career, considering many hyped him up to be a star once LeBron departed from Cleveland. Again, Darius Garland at $7 million, great value for a rising point guard in this league. And Isaac Okoro at $6 million. You hope that he takes that next step as a player in his two-way in his development as a two-way player next season. I think there's no chance that he's going to become a star player, but maybe he takes the next step in being a solid role player next year. That would be that would be the optimal step for Cleveland, especially making $6 million per year, since he was the 5th pick in the draft. Moving on, Collin Sexton making $6 million per year. Any team that trades for Collin Sexton needs to keep in mind that he's going to be paid $6 million this upcoming year, but then after that, he's going to need a contract extension. And he's eligible for, the rookie max. So that's the main reason why the Cavs don't want to retain him, is because they don't think he's worth that rookie max. So any team that trades for Collin Sexton is going to have to keep that in mind. But $6 million per year this next season, using that, with that in mind, teams can use the rest of their cap to build the roster around Collin Sexton and, the other players on that team that upcoming year, since, he's only going to be on that $6 million contract, which I think is great value depending on the team that trades for him. Moving on, Dylan Windler was a 2nd-round pick, I believe, in the 2019 draft. Not much of a player. I think he's really a fringe rotation player on the Cavs. Which if you're a fringe rotation player on the Cavs, then you might as well quit. And then you move on to a player, Isaiah Hartstein. The only reason why I have him here is because he has a player option and he's not even an NBA caliber player, really. And, with 1.7 mil, I doubt he's going to make a 1.7 mil anywhere else. So I have him picking up that option. That's the only reason why I included him. And you have to keep in mind Andre Drummond's dead cap due to Cleveland releasing him at 28 million. You have to keep in mind, I believe they should retain, Damian Dotson. I think he had an off year, but he was horrible shooting from the field, as I previously stated. So I doubt they bring him back. But really, Cleveland's in a horrible situation financially, paying all these players that are not worth these contracts. And you're looking at the young guys, it's just not really all that hopeful for Cleveland. They have a $10 million trade exception, as I previously stated, so maybe they potentially pick up somebody there. But, just looking at these contracts on face value, there's no really positive contracts outside of Darius Garland. And you have to keep in mind that the third pick in the draft, whoever they use that pick on, is going to be on an $8 million per year salary, as well as re-signing Jared Allen. So, the salary caps are only the salary cap is only continued to get more expensive for Cleveland, as it's already looking this grim. Next up, taking a look at the draft pick for the Cavs in the 2021 draft. They only have the third pick, and really it's either going to be Evan Mobley or Jalen Green, depending on Houston decides not to pick. We can take a look at Evan Mobley first. I think he would fit nicely in Cleveland. He slide in at the 4 next to Jared Allen. And Jared Allen can really take over, the bruising, the inside presence, while Evan Mobley continues to fill out his frame as time goes on. And he can really highlight, his playmaking ability, flesh out his shooting potential and his playmaking potential, his scoring potential. And the defensive end, he can highlight his versatility. He can be guarding most fours, until he fills out his frame. I think he would have great synergy with Darius Garland as not only a pick and roll threat as both a rim roller, but he would be able to operate out of out of a rim roller, as he has a great ability to find open teammates, off that pass, off the pick and roll. And I think he can have potential as a pick and pop option with Darius Garland. So he would help out Darius Garland's game, as well as get a player like Isaac Okoro more involved off offenses, since teams are going to have to, pay attention to Evan Mobley when he rolls to the rim. And, Evan Mobley has shown an ability to find teammates off the roll. So I think he would be able to get open shots for Isaac Okoro, for Taurean Prince. And I think he could find roll men, throw it up a nice little lob for Jared Allen when Jared Allen is operating that dunker spot. And as well as defensively, his versatility will be highlighted, as, he'll pretty much be asked to, guard around the perimeter, guard fours really, which I think he's going to do a much better job than, guarding fives right off the bat in the NBA. And then moving on to Jalen Green, who it seems like Cleveland hopes is going to be there at 3, as that's really the only pathway I see making sense to move on from a 24 point per game scorer and Collin Sexton is, Jalen Green sliding in at the 2 guard, being a bigger, more efficient scorer than Collin Sexton, being a better defender than Collin Sexton. I think he would be a great fit in Cleveland too. Darius Garland would be that playmaker, as well as, that second option on offense next to Jalen Green. Isaac Okoro would cover his defensive woes, as Isaac Okoro would pick up the toughest defensive assignment. I think he would also have great synergy with a player like Jared Allen. Jared Allen would be that great role man for him, and as well as an anchor on defense, which will allow, again, Jalen Green to grow on the defensive end. And I think Jalen Green, would fit in well with players, again, like Taurean Prince, maybe Cedi Osman if he gets better as a shooter. Kevin Love, those guys would give him space, so it would give him room to attack the paint, and really continue to grow skill sets. So again, I think Jalen Green is likely going to be there. I mean, if I was Houston, again, I would pick Evan Mobley as I fleshed out my opinion on those 2 players in my Houston video. But Jalen Green, I think, would be a great fit, and it really seems like the player that Cleveland hopes is going to be there with the 3rd pick. Moving on, we're going to be taking a look at 2 trades for Larry Nance that I came up with myself. I have him being traded to 2 contending teams that could definitely use help at that front court spots. First up, we have the Clippers, who, Serge Ibaka is probably going to be back. He had injury issues this year, back issues, wasn't all that great when he did play. But he does have a 9.7 option on his contract this year at $10 million, and I don't know where else he's going to be making $10 million given the back issues. So I'm assuming that he accepts it. And again, Zubac is on contract, but Zubac was played off the floor this year in the playoffs, and Serge Ibaka with the back issues, I could definitely see, the Clippers looking for more front court help. And I think Larry Nance would definitely provide that. He would be able to facilitate, act as a rim runner, and as well as be a great option defensively when the Clippers would go small ball. And the package I have for him is, Rondo, Daniel Oturu, and the 25th pick for Larry Nance. Rondo was pretty bad for the Clippers this year, pretty inconsistent, really. Didn't really see the floor much in the later rounds of the playoffs, as he wasn't much of a shooter. Was kind of ball dominant on offense. When would you rather have the ball in his hands or Reggie Jackson, who was a great player, great scorer for the Clippers in the playoffs, as well as a Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. So he didn't really see the floor much, making right around the same amount of money as Larry Nance, only 1 year on his contract. The Cavs definitely need more point guard depth. Maybe Rondo could come in, be the backup point guard, maybe mentor Darius Garland, maybe a little bit. That doesn't seem like Rondo's style, but, still maybe. Daniel Oturu was a second-round pick last year, was traded to the Clippers for cash, I believe, from my Knicks. He averaged like 15 and 9 in college for Minnesota, and was a pretty good two-way player in Minnesota. Showed flashes of being a shooter. It's pretty slow for being a 6'8" big man. So I think he definitely has some intriguing potential. He is a 6'8" slow-footed center still, so how valuable he is really is still yet to be seen. But I could definitely see that being an avenue. A player that maybe Cleveland will want to take a look at, as well as acquiring Rajon Rondo, and as well as the 25th pick. This class, as I've mentioned, as I've gone over previously in my other videos, is pretty deep. There's a lot of first-round talent, high first-round talent, and I'm sure there will be some players that will fall into the later first round, into the second round, who would normally be maybe mid first round, late lottery picks at that 25 spot. You never know who slides. So I could definitely see them. You add a solid prospect with the 25th pick. You add more point guard depth and a veteran with Rondo, an expiring contract, and then you add Daniel Oturu, a player you can see what's what with. And moving on for the Nets to the next trade, which I have him going to the Nets. Again, another player who we obviously know, another team that we obviously know needs front court depth, as they really have pretty much nobody. Maybe Nicholas Claxton, maybe Blake Griffin, assuming he doesn't get a big contract from, a contending team outside of the Nets. But this package, I have DeAndre Jordan going to the Cavs, as well as Nicholas Claxton, as well as the 27th pick, or Brooklyn has a pair of second-round picks in this draft, which would be the 49th pick and the 59th pick, or the 27th pick. DeAndre Jordan has 2 years left on his deal, is really pretty much unplayable, but given that he is pretty much unplayable, whereas you take a look with the Clippers, Rajon Rondo could have an impact with the Cavs day one. With the Nets, DeAndre Jordan is not going to have that. He's pretty much an unplayable player. So I attached a more valuable young asset in Nicholas Claxton, who's a versatile 6'11" big, a two-way player to the Cavs, and I think Larry Nance is better. I think the high outcome for Nicholas Claxton is a Larry Nance-esque player. So the Nets would acquire a win-now player with their big three. And then maybe if the Nets think that's too much, I say the 49th pick and 59th pick, if they think, that they're already giving a lot, since, that's less attractive draft capital with that 49th to 59th pick, but you never know who could be selected there. And then if they're okay with giving up the 27th pick, which they do have, which would be right around the range of the 25th pick with the Clippers, I have them taking it. But again, if they think Nicholas Claxton is too valuable of an asset, I say they attach the two later second-round picks that they have to Claxton and DeAndre Jordan to get this deal done. I think in both trade scenarios, I think both teams would win. Obviously with the Cavs, they add draft capital. They add, one veteran would be an expiring contract and who can add point guard depth. The other one who could just add veteran mentorship for the next 2 years. And both trades, Daniel Oturu didn't see the floor pretty much at all in LA, with the Clippers, but I think definitely still has some potential that hopefully the Cavs can tap into. And then with the Nets, obviously Nicholas Claxton, we all know his two-way value. Again, so no major trades, but again, a very valuable asset that the Cavs have in Larry Nance, who's not going to net you like anything crazy, but I think these are very solid trade packages that would definitely continue to help the Cavs move into the right direction of that total rebuild, which I think they've been struggling to enter into for the past couple years. Moving on to potential free agents, I think the Cavs should take a look at. Obviously, they don't have that much. They really have no cap space. $5 million if everything goes well. So I don't really have them taking a look at anything crazy. Tyler Johnson, a bottom of the barrel point guard who can add depth at that position. Maybe like a Troy Daniels, a guy who can space the floor. Same thing with like a Tony Snell. Maybe Dennis Smith Jr. See if he can revitalize his NBA career. Fill out your roster with those kind of guys, and then with that mid-level exception that I mentioned before. I think a player like Kelly Oubre, who is really a role player, and he thinks he's more than a role player. But if he really bought into that role player, if he really bought into that role, I think he could be a very valuable asset. As a guy who can potentially space the floor, attack closeouts, maybe be versatile defensively if his IQ ever works out. He's probably going to demand more than that $10 million mid-level exception that the Cavs have, but I think it's still a player worth trying to get with that mid-level exception. Next, I have Josh Richardson, who was a valuable player in Miami, who I thought had star potential. He averaged like 17 points per game when Miami was a great 3-and-D player for them. Went to Philly, was really a shell of his Miami self. Went on to Dallas in that Seth Curry trade and was really a disaster for Dallas. Really couldn't shoot. Was a good, not great defender. He's already making around $10 million per year, and given how disappointing he's been in his last two stops, I doubt that he's going to get anything more than $10 million per year. So maybe Cleveland could bring him on, add depth, maybe see if he can, again, revitalize his career. And then finally, we have a player like Josh Hart, who I think is more than I'm not sure how much he's really worth, because he drafted by the Lakers, was in the Anthony Davis trade, a pretty valuable 3-and-D role player in my opinion. He's been able to shoot in previous years, great rebounder for his size, great effort, great role player, versatility defensively. But he was pretty bad this year. It seemed like his head just wasn't in the right spot with New Orleans. It seems like, again, both sides would like to break up, and I think he could be valuable. Given how poorly he was this season, or how disappointing he was this season, I'd say maybe his value is right around that $10 million mid-level exception. So maybe, just maybe, he would be. Maybe Cleveland should take a look at him. But again, he might be more valuable than that $10 million mid-level exception. So whether or not he is or isn't, I think Cleveland should still give it a shot. But again, these are guys who could revitalize their NBA career, and really just other guards to fill out the depth around Darius Garland and the rest of this Cleveland roster. And that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Again, Cleveland, horrible spot, arguably the worst spot of any NBA team. Hopefully with this third pick, they draft their franchise savior. Hopefully Darius Garland and Isaac Okoro continue to develop. Maybe they can get something for the veterans. Again, I think they should definitely look to trade Larry Nance for maybe a late first and a expiring contract to a contending team. And continue to probably just look to try to move on from those big contracts. Re-sign Jared Allen. But just continue to blow up the roster. Get rid of the veterans, and continue to hope that the young players continue to develop. And maybe continue to explore Collin Sexton trade packages. But that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you aren't subscribed, and share it with a friend if you like the content. Thank you so much for watching again, and peace, guys.